Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolutely wild story of how one company, DJI, went from a tiny dorm room startup to basically owning the entire drone market. And they did it in just 5 years.
So let's start with a single number, $30,000. Yeah, you heard that right. Back in 2008, that was the price of one single cutting-edge drone. And the craziest part, people were actually lining up to buy it.
A price tag like that just makes you wonder, right? What on earth could make a drone worth that much money, and who was the person building this thing by hand? Well, the answer to that question is really the story of how a small, struggling startup completely turned an entire industry on its head.
Okay, so to really get that $30,000 drone, we need to meet its creator. The whole story kicks off with a graduate student named Wang Tao, who was just completely and totally obsessed with one very difficult engineering problem: how to make helicopters fly all by themselves.
He started DJI right out of his dorm room back in 2006. But things, well, they did not start off great. Wang Tao was a genius engineer for sure, but he wasn't exactly a seasoned business leader. The company had no real focus, they were just selling random model parts, and they were bleeding money. They were pretty much on the brink of bankruptcy until his university mentor actually stepped in and invested his own cash just to keep the dream afloat.
But after all that early struggle, something just clicked, and the company's growth was, honestly, explosive. I mean, look at this. From that dorm room in '06, they have a breakthrough drone just 2 years later. By 2012, they're changing the game in Hollywood, and by 2013, they've achieved total market domination. That 2008 drone, that was the spark that lit the whole fuse.
So what was so special about that drone? Well, this was no toy. It was a serious industrial tool. It could carry a heavy, professional-grade camera, it had a stabilizing gimbal for smooth footage, and it could fly fully autonomous routes using waypoints, which was pretty much unheard of at the time. This got the attention of some major institutions. And, just like that, DJI's money problems were over.
So now, with cash finally flowing in, DJI found itself at a crossroads. Do they stick with what they know, serving a few big, high-paying clients, or do they pivot and go after the massive consumer market? This was a decision that was going to change everything.
Really, the choice was between two completely different types of technology. The single-rotor drones they were building were these mechanical marvels, but they were super complex and expensive. But then there was this new, simpler kind of drone emerging, the quadcopter. It was electronically simple, way cheaper to make, and easy enough for a total beginner to fly. For Wang Tao, a guy driven by his passion for tech, the choice was obvious. He went all in on the consumer path.
Now, this whole pivot was only possible because of some key new technologies. You had things like powerful brushless motors and much better lithium-ion batteries that were getting rid of all the heavy, complicated gears. The entire industry was making this huge shift away from clunky mechanics toward elegant, lightweight electronics, and that's what made the quadcopter a real possibility.
You know, while all their competitors were scrambling to put out these cheap, toy-like quadcopters, DJI did something really smart. They took their incredibly advanced flight control technology and aimed it at solving a very, very expensive problem for a very, very demanding industry, Hollywood.
And what was that problem? Well, it's this number right here, $7,000. That's how much it could cost a film crew for a single day just to rent a helicopter to get those epic aerial shots. The market was absolutely begging for a cheaper, better alternative.
DJI's solution came together in a few key steps. First, Wang Tao meets this American entrepreneur named Colin Guan, who desperately needed a way to get smooth aerial video. That meeting sparked an idea. DJI realized they could adapt their drone stabilization tech to build a camera gimbal. So in 2012, they launched the Zenmuse Z15. It was a massive runaway success and an absolute game changer for filmmakers everywhere.
With the Zenmuse making them millions, DJI made its final checkmate move. In 2013, they took all their best tech, the amazing flight controls, the gimbal stabilization, that easy-to-fly quadcopter design, and they bundled it all into one product. That product was the Phantom 1. It was the first drone that was ready to fly right out of the box for under $1,000. And just like that, the consumer market was theirs.
You know how it goes. With incredible success often comes incredible conflict. That partnership with the American salesman, Colin Guan, it was absolutely essential for breaking into the US market. But it also led to this really dramatic falling out that showed the world Wang Tao's ruthless, laser-like focus on control.
The whole thing really came to a head over a potential partnership with GoPro. Apparently, Gwynn had shaken hands on a profit split where GoPro got the lion's share, but Wang Tao flat out refused. He insisted on a 50-50 deal or no deal at all. The deal fell apart, and so did the partnership.
So, when Gwynn was forced out, he demanded a huge stake in the parent company for his shares in the North American branch. Wang Tao's response was, swift and absolutely brutal. He locked Gwynn out of the building, moved all the operations back to China, and sent this message. It made it crystal clear who was in charge.
All right, so let's put all the pieces together. How on earth did this company go from being nearly bankrupt to total global domination in just 5 short years? Well, it wasn't any one single thing. It was this powerful combination of factors that created the perfect storm. First, let's talk technology. DJI used common off-the-shelf sensors, basically the same kind you'd find in your smartphone. Their real secret weapon was their software. They used clever algorithms like common filtering, which acts like a smart predictor. It takes in all this messy, noisy data from the sensors, filters out all the junk, and makes their drones unbelievably stable and reliable.
Then, they fine-tuned the flight controls with an obsessive level of detail, using something called a PID controller. This little feedback mechanism is basically the difference between a jerky robotic movement and a smooth, fluid one. It makes the drone feel less like a machine and more like an extension of an experienced pilot. And because DJI wrote all this code themselves, in-house, they had a proprietary system that made their drones fly with a precision that no one could match.
So there you have it. That was the recipe for success. You had superior proprietary software that nobody could copy. After that whole drama with GoPro, they got ruthless about vertical integration, making everything themselves. They timed the market perfectly, jumping on the quadcopter trend at just the right moment. And finally, they took full advantage of the manufacturing paradise of Shenzhen to build high-quality stuff faster and cheaper than anyone else in the world. In the end, from filming disaster zones to completely revolutionizing Hollywood, DJI proved that drones were so much more than just toys. They were powerful, accessible tools for everyone. They won the market by making the complex simple and the expensive cheap, which really just leaves us all wondering, what industry will their technology transform next?